She was once hailed as the queen of grunge, a fierce frontwoman, a cultural icon, and the woman who stood at the center of rock's most infamous love story. Courtney Love wasn't just a musician, she was a symbol of chaos, rebellion, and raw intensity. But behind the electric performances with her band Hole and the glamorous headlines of her marriage to Nirvana's Kurt Cobain, there was a darker reality: drug addiction, scandal, and tragedy. When Cobain's death shook the world in 1994, Courtney found herself not only grieving the man she loved but also thrust into a storm of suspicion, blame, and public scrutiny. Her name became synonymous with controversy. Was she a muse, a villain, or simply another victim of the destructive rock and roll lifestyle? This is the story of Courtney Love, the meteoric rise, the tumultuous romance, the scandals that nearly destroyed her, and the lingering question of how much of her legacy will forever be defined by tragedy rather than talent. Courtney Michelle Harrison, later known to the world as Courtney Love, was born on July 9, 1964, in San Francisco, California. From the very beginning, her life was marked by turbulence. Her parents, Linda Carroll, a psychotherapist, and Hank Harrison, a writer and road manager for the Grateful Dead, split when Courtney was just a toddler. The divorce led to a fractured family life, with Courtney caught in the middle of ongoing conflict. Her childhood was far from stable. After her parents' separation, Courtney moved frequently, living with different relatives and spending time in group homes. Her mother remarried, bringing new siblings into her life, but also further complicating her sense of belonging. Struggling to fit in, Courtney often clashed with authority figures and developed a reputation for being rebellious and defiant. By her teenage years, she had already endured significant hardship. At the age of 9, she was diagnosed with mild autism, a detail that added another layer to her feelings of isolation. At 14, she was arrested for shoplifting, and soon after, she was legally emancipated from her parents, essentially left to fend for herself. Courtney drifted through a series of foster homes and odd jobs, from stripping to working in music clubs, as she searched for her place in the world. Music became both a refuge and a lifeline. She found inspiration in punk rock and alternative scenes, identifying with the raw anger and rebellion they expressed. These early years of instability shaped her into a complex and often volatile figure, someone who learned to rely on her own strength to survive. The chaos of her childhood would echo throughout her adult life, fueling both her artistry and her demons. Courtney Love's path toward music and fame was anything but conventional. Formal education never held her interest for long. After her turbulent childhood, she spent brief periods at different schools before drifting away entirely, chasing experiences that were often as destructive as they were formative. She spent time traveling abroad as a teenager, living in Ireland and later New Zealand, where she worked various odd jobs, including as a cleaner and a stripper. These years gave her a fierce independence but also exposed her to instability and addiction at a young age. Her early career attempts were eclectic. In the early 1980s, she pursued acting, studying at the San Francisco Art Institute and later landing a small role in Alex Cox's cult classic Sid and Nancy, 1986. Playing a punk groupie, while acting gave her exposure, it was music that truly called to her. Drawn to the raw aggression of punk and the emerging alternative rock scene, Courtney began experimenting with forming her own bands. In 1989, she founded Hole alongside guitarist Eric Erlandson, with Courtney as the lead singer and rhythm guitarist. Hole quickly gained attention in the underground rock circuit for its abrasive sound and provocative lyrics. Her stage presence was unapologetically confrontational, part performance, part cathartic release. Critics and fans alike noted that Courtney's intensity felt authentic, a direct product of her chaotic upbringing and uncompromising personality. Though still finding her voice, Courtney Love had already carved out a place for herself in the male-dominated world of rock. She was brash, fearless, and ambitious, unafraid to shock audiences or challenge conventions. What she lacked in technical polish, she more than made up for in charisma and raw emotion. By the dawn of the 1990s, She was poised to become not just a musician, but a cultural figure whose life and art would soon intertwine with one of rock's most tragic stories. The turning point in Courtney Love's career came in the early 1990s, when grunge exploded from the underground to the mainstream, with Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden dominating the charts. Her band Hole found itself swept into the same cultural wave. In 1991, Hole released their debut album, Pretty on the Inside. The record was abrasive, chaotic, and raw, qualities that perfectly reflected Courtney's persona. Critics praised its visceral power, and while it didn't sell millions, it positioned Hole as an authentic voice in the alternative scene. At the same time, Courtney's personal life shifted dramatically when she met Nirvana frontman Kurt Cobain. The two quickly fell into an intense, whirlwind romance that made them one of the most famous and controversial couples in rock history. Their relationship was fueled by both love and excess, a blend of creative synergy and destructive habits. Their marriage in 1992 drew headlines worldwide, cementing Courtney's place in the mythology of the grunge era. Professionally, she reached her peak in 1994 with Hole's second album, Live Through This. Released just days after Cobain's death, the album was hailed as a masterpiece, with tracks like Doll Parts and Miss World showcasing Courtney's ability to channel rage, grief, and vulnerability into music. Critics lauded the record as one of the defining works of the decade, and it remains Hole's most acclaimed album to this day. The combination of Live Through This and her high-profile marriage transformed Courtney from underground provocateur to mainstream figure. She became a symbol of female power in rock, a brash, unapologetic presence in an industry still dominated by men. Her sharp tongue, wild fashion, and unfiltered interviews made her a favorite of the press, but also a lightning rod for criticism. To some, she was a feminist icon breaking barriers. To others, she was reckless, dangerous, and undeserving of her fame. Despite the controversy, there was no denying Courtney Love's cultural impact. In the span of just a few years, she had gone from a struggling actress and underground musician to one of the most infamous figures of the 1990s music scene. But success came at a cost. Her growing fame, paired with her volatile marriage and drug addiction, placed her under relentless scrutiny. The world wasn't just listening to her music, it was dissecting her every move, setting the stage for the tragedies and scandals that would soon follow. Few love stories in rock history have been as mythologized, or as tragic, as that of Courtney Love and Kurt Cobain. When the two met in 1991, both were rising forces in the grunge scene. Courtney was the fierce frontwoman of Hole, and Kurt was on the cusp of becoming a generational icon with Nirvana. Their connection was immediate, intense, and all-consuming. The pair married in February 1992 on a cliff in Hawaii, with Courtney already pregnant with their daughter, Frances Bean Cobain. From the outside, their relationship seemed like a union of two rebellious spirits who had finally found their match. But behind the romantic imagery was a darker reality. Both struggled with heroin addiction, and their shared demons fueled an often chaotic, unstable partnership. Their love was passionate but destructive. Reports of drug use, arguments, and erratic behavior filled the tabloids. The birth of Frances brought hope for stability, but also controversy. In 1992, Vanity Fair published an explosive article claiming Courtney had used heroin while pregnant. Child Protective Services briefly investigated, and the couple faced the possibility of losing custody of their daughter. The scandal painted them as reckless, further intensifying the media frenzy around their marriage. Despite the turbulence, their creative bond was undeniable. Courtney and Kurt inspired one another musically, and Courtney often described their love as profound, even transcendent. Yet, Kurt's struggles with depression and addiction grew more severe. In April 1994, he was found dead at their Seattle home, the victim of an apparent suicide. The loss devastated Courtney and thrust her into the harshest spotlight imaginable. At just 29 years old, she was a widow, a single mother, and a lightning rod for public grief and anger. In the aftermath, Courtney's image became even more polarizing. Some praised her for her raw, emotional public eulogy and her resilience in continuing to perform with Hole. Others unfairly cast blame, accusing her of enabling Kurt's addiction or worse. The tragedy cemented her as one of the most controversial figures in music, forever linked to the mythos of Cobain's life and death. Her relationship with Kurt Cobain remains one of the most defining and debated aspects of her life. It was a love story drenched in artistry, chaos, and tragedy, one that shaped Courtney's identity in ways both inspiring and destructive. If Courtney Love's early career and marriage to Kurt Cobain made her a rock icon, the years that followed solidified her reputation as one of the most scandalous figures in music. Fame, grief, and addiction collided, and the results were often disastrous. In the wake of Cobain's death in 1994, Courtney initially channeled her pain into her work. Hole's album Live Through This became a critical and commercial success. But even as the music soared, her personal life spiraled downward. Struggling with heroin and later prescription drug abuse, Courtney became a magnet for controversy. Her public outbursts, erratic behavior, and frequent clashes with the press ensured that she was rarely out of the headlines. One of the most shocking incidents occurred in 1995, when she physically attacked a fellow musician during Lollapalooza. In 1997, she was arrested for disrupting a flight after refusing to stop smoking and behaving aggressively. Courtrooms became as familiar to her as concert stages, as she faced numerous charges ranging from assault to drug possession. Each arrest reinforced her image as rock's wildest and most troubled woman. Her battles with addiction also bled into her role as a mother. In 2003, Courtney lost custody of her daughter Frances Bean Cobain after overdosing in front of her. The incident shocked the public, painting a portrait of a woman unable to escape the cycle of chaos. Though custody was later restored, her relationship with Frances remained strained for years, with Frances publicly distancing herself from her mother in adulthood. Courtney's career suffered alongside her personal struggles. Although she pursued acting, earning praise for her role in The People vs. Larry Flynt, 1996, her credibility was undermined by her unpredictable behavior. She released music sporadically, but her output was often overshadowed by headlines about arrests, lawsuits, and feuds with other celebrities. In the 2000s, she became embroiled in multiple legal battles over Cobain's estate, sparring with Nirvana's surviving members, Dave Grohl and Chris Novoselic. Lawsuits over rights to Nirvana's music dragged on for years, fueling the narrative of Courtney as combative and self-destructive. Public opinion was deeply divided. To some, she was a tragic figure, a widow consumed by grief and addiction. To others, she was reckless, selfish, and destructive, embodying every negative stereotype of rock stardom. Media coverage often vilified her, turning her into a caricature of dysfunction rather than acknowledging the complexities of her life. By the late 2000s, Courtney Love's image had become almost inseparable from scandal. The once promising musician and actress was now more famous for her meltdowns than her art. Addiction, legal troubles, and strained relationships had pushed her to the brink, casting doubt on whether she could ever reclaim the brilliance that had once made her a star. By the mid-2000s, Courtney Love's life had become a battlefield of legal battles, public meltdowns, and drug abuse. The consequences of years of chaos left her career in ruins and her reputation at rock bottom. No longer celebrated as the fearless frontwoman of Hole or the talented actress from The People vs. Larry Flynt, she was often dismissed as a tragic cautionary tale of fame and addiction. Yet, Courtney Love has never been one to disappear quietly. In the years following her lowest moments, she made multiple attempts to rebuild her life and career. One of her earliest comeback efforts came in 2004 with her solo album America's Sweetheart. However, the release was overshadowed by her erratic behavior, arrests, and drug-related controversies. The album flopped, reinforcing the perception that her days as a serious musician were over. But Courtney's resilience remained. In 2010, She revived Hole with a new lineup and released Nobody's Daughter. While it didn't reach the critical acclaim of her earlier work, it was proof that she was still capable of creating raw, emotionally charged music. Around the same time, she sought treatment for her addictions and began speaking openly about her struggles with substance abuse. For the first time in years, she seemed intent on regaining control. Her attempts at rehabilitation extended beyond music. She returned to acting in smaller roles and even tried her hand at visual arts, showcasing paintings and photographs. Interviews during this period revealed a woman aware of her mistakes, alternately apologetic and defensive, but undeniably reflective. Public fascination with her never disappeared, and every move she made was scrutinized. But Courtney leaned into her controversial persona, embracing her role as rock's eternal provocateur. In her personal life, she attempted to mend her fractured relationship with her daughter, Frances Bean. Although their bond was slow to rebuild, there were signs of reconciliation, showing that Courtney's journey wasn't just about reclaiming fame but also about healing. Still, her comebacks have always been complicated. Every step forward seemed to be shadowed by reminders of her past, old scandals resurfacing, public skepticism, and her own volatility. And yet, her persistence is remarkable. Unlike many who succumb completely to addiction and infamy, Courtney Love has continuously fought to redefine herself, refusing to be erased from music history. Her story in this era is one of contradictions, moments of clarity and artistry, followed by relapses into chaos. But even in the wreckage, Courtney Love has shown an undeniable will to survive and a refusal to let tragedy or scandal have the final word. Today, Courtney Love stands as one of the most polarizing figures in rock history. No longer the chaotic frontwoman who dominated headlines in the 1990s. She has shifted into a quieter, though still unpredictable, phase of her life. Now in her 60s, she speaks openly about her battles with addiction and mental health, acknowledging the scars while insisting that survival itself is a kind of victory. In recent years, Courtney has taken steps toward stability. She has focused on writing memoirs, engaging with visual art, and making occasional musical appearances. Interviews reveal a reflective woman who knows her reputation but refuses to let it define her completely. "I've made mistakes," she has admitted, "but I've also made history." That tension, between her achievements and her scandals, continues to define her legacy. Her daughter, Frances Bean Cobain, has forged her own path, and while their relationship has not been without strain, signs of reconciliation suggest a measure of healing. For Courtney, that bond represents perhaps the most meaningful form of redemption after decades of chaos. Culturally, she remains a symbol of contradiction, a feminist icon to some, a destructive force to others. Musicians of a younger generation often cite her as an influence, proof that her art still resonates despite the controversies. Yet the debates linger. Was she unfairly vilified as a woman in rock? Or did she fuel her own downfall through addiction and self-destruction? What is certain is that Courtney Love's story is far from finished. She embodies both brilliance and ruin, love and tragedy, rebellion and regret, as she continues to live in the shadow of her own legend. One question remains: will her legacy be remembered for the music she created, or the scandals that consumed her life?